All right. All right. Let's see here. Boom. Well, it's not 17, it is 18. Okay, there we go, there we go. Hello! Let's see here. Atski. Chillstrad. Jaha. So, I've been on the down low working on this one a little bit. It's not like crazy progress or anything, mostly just slowly, uh, getting it detailed. But it's slowly becoming interesting. I haven't had that much time. Oh, oh, I see the donation ticker is moving. Awesome. That is great news. Let's see. Let it see. Let's put that maybe there. Is that weird? There? Just yeah, exactly. Currently, I'm just kind of experimenting, or slowly. I haven't touched it in a really long time, but I thought I'd just show it on the stream where I have taken it. I maybe spent since last time I showed it, maybe spent 3 hours, uh, just starting to block things out. The materials on Samus, etc., is getting there, but far from where it needs to be. It's a good foundation, but it's not by any means like the final. If I switch on the layers, for example, you'll see a lot more details that's not there, and so on. But it'll get there at some point if I want to finish it. I'm not sure if I will though, but it's good fun. So I was thinking, let's get the 2-week challenge over. One thing though that I want to mention with the 2-week challenge is that I've set up now because uh, Discord have enabled they enabled categories. So what I'm gonna do in the future is all the 2-week challenges. Oh, I wonder if that's the same one. Um, so I will make a new directory for every challenge, so it's easier to have a cleaner overview of which competition it is and which and so on. Hey Ops, Husky Jacob Mobley. You surfaced. Awesome to see you here. Oms, is this the same as the last post here? I hope so. If it's not, let me know. But it kind of looks the same. Maybe it's not. Should be. A little bit brighter, but there was no other difference. Yeah, so going forward, I will make a new directory for every 2-week challenge, and then I will remove this one after I will lock it, I think, and then I will go and kind of data collect who's done what, and then so no one will be able to post on this channel anymore. All the channels will be open here, and I will go and I will collect everyone's name, and I think all the pictures are saved, so I don't need to do that. But I will go and collect everyone's name for who participated. And there's a new feature as well that says every new person joining the server, they get a welcome ping on the channel. Hey, Delirium. Hello. Yeah, and I'm gonna start grouping things together, but the problem is what they haven't started is that you can't move the past history to a new. So if I want to make like useful links, it's gonna be all the previous posts is going to be removed, which is kind of shitty. Hey, Delirium. Right, so we got 2 more. Okay, I guess I'll show you. As you're showing yours, I'll show you mine. But here's where I got mine, but it's far from finished. I just spent like half an hour on color on my 2-week challenge. These 2 weeks have been busy, very busy. I haven't had time to paint anymore on a lot of spare stuff. Okay, so this is aluminiums. Yeah, I like the composition. I think the framing is nice. He obviously plays black. The white is dead. I think it's cool. One thing that kind of irks me with the painting is if we flip it. Let's see if it's obvious. There is there is like perspective issues, right? There's like a kink in the window, and this line is very straight. And then the line that goes there is very hard, and it feels like it's not going with perspective. If you know, the fanning of the perspective. But I also think you could easily faded the light more to focus to make it less contrasty, because you want the interaction down here, right? So the idea is that you should deliver the message of the dead, you know, he made a move and you lost, right? So when you're doing these kind of things, when it's very limited objects, you really got to work with like what's there. And so that being said, if we look at what's here, the pole changes width. You know, it's thicker up top, and his hands are just like dead sausages. You know, he's not. You know, he's not like holding it, right? That doesn't occur. It's just like a pack of hot dogs, and that's a big issue. And the way the arm bends in like that makes it feel like you're forcing everything into the frame. Thanks, babe. And my wife came with wine delivery. Yeah, so what it comes off as is that you're forcing information in the frame, and better to be subtle than incorrectly like overstating, right? So, hey there, Bart. Hey, Boomfy. This is a 2-week challenge. So this is aluminium. It's a user or a aluminium. Mininuim. Wow, my spelling. From a Discord community. I'm doing a Paintover session with a 2-week challenge. Hey, Miller. And Bomfi, yes, indeed. It's a very interesting piece. I really like it. So that being said, what we're also missing, like I mentioned, the hot dog pack of hot dog sausages. You need to show more of how he's holding the scythe. Aluminum, yeah. AXC. Yeah. So that being said, like we're losing. We're adjusting the cape. We're changing the rhythm of the painting, but then also where is his other hand? You know, you're losing a little bit of opportunity to show. You know, maybe is he holding his shirt or cape together? You know, there's emotions to be had here, other than just having the arm hanging dead. You know, where's the depth, right? So then also you have this red light coming into the scene on the right side of everything, but there is no sign of red light. I get it that it's death, you know, maybe he has that, but it's all very confusing, and I wouldn't put the red in there. And secondly, there's a lot of very hard shapes on the hood that's detracting from the rhythm of the painting. So by just adjusting some of the darks, you can dictate a more better rhythm or direction of the painting. Bumpy, all the Paintovers, they are recorded, and on Discord there is a specific channel for the 2-week challenge. So after this session, this Paintover session of the community's entries, I will set a new challenge, another 2-week challenge, and then I will do another Paintover after two weeks. Yeah, and all the Paintovers are available upon request. So, you know, we're adjusting the position, but also the head feels a little bit like it's not in the hood. So the idea is that you should, you know, you need to continue the curvature of the head, right? That's what holds the hood up. So it's important that you try to mimic that. And there's some strange shapes in the skeleton itself. It doesn't come off as human. I get it that it's human, but the shapes themselves, they're very, they feel very random, like you didn't look at the reference of what a real human skull looks like. And then if you want to stylize it from that, you can. But it's yeah, the light light on the skull doesn't make a lot of sense. So what you probably should do is you can light it towards us, right? So every form coming out towards us will receive some highlight, and then it falls off into shadow. And because the same way here on the hood, you have the same light setup, and same on the coat, right? So it's important to be consistent. Now I don't know about the death smoking a pipe. I mean, I guess it makes sense, you know, as it's death. He doesn't give a shit. But it's a little bit weird that it's just a pipe hanging there. So what you could probably, you know, maybe smoke or something that helps guide the eye through the painting. And I was thinking, you know, maybe he looks at you and smiles, you know, or something that indicates a little bit of an emotion. Or maybe it's enough with just him sitting there. Just killed you. Bumpy, yeah, the idea of this is everyone has 2 weeks to paint something on a topic I set, and then after 2 weeks I offer Paintovers for everyone that participates in the Discord 2-week challenge. So that's, you know, I would just add a lot of details, like tell a story with the board as well. Um, you know, make it used, make it old. Maybe there's you know, dust and scratches. I also wouldn't have this line straight, because it kind of nukes the perspective a little bit too much. You really gotta show it's a checkerboard. And also, I think what's important is, like I added upstairs, is a subtle framing, because we need to look um, towards the purpose of the painting, right? The story. I'm not sure about the colors. The colors feel a little bit weird. That's like purple, blue, red, green, yellow. Um, I wouldn't necessarily have done that palette. I would probably have adjusted it a little bit. Bob Ross of them. No, I'm just having a glass of wine. Hey, Hefes, bro, it's all good. Right, so um, with the colors in mind, I like the cold palette. Like he's you know, he is death. He brings death, right? One thing that is weird, though, I must say, is the red. It doesn't have a place in the painting. It feels like a last minute, thing. You see, if you remove it, it becomes way more consistent, and it doesn't like break the painting that much. And we can now look at the painting as a whole, instead of landing only or purely on the red. So those would be the major changes I would try to do to make it more more cohesive as a painting. You could add the reflection, or what's it called? Reflection. Yeah, you could make reflection like it's a board um, that's, you know, taken care of, but still having it scratched and dirty and textured and so on. Got surprised by the noise. It was such a long time ago since I streamed with a UI on. um, but thanks very much, Bumpy. You and me, we rocky run all day long. Hey, Zillion. So that would be the major changes. I think compositionally, your version is interesting. It has a great narrative, but these things that I mentioned, I think would enhance your painting a little bit more. You know, making it a little bit more consistent, slightly more narrative, a better focal point, and so on. Bring us back down to the board, but then we read him and we circle around. As just a final thing, I think the scythe, you could add some subtle silhouette change at key locations to help sell the idea of the scythe being used. It feels a little bit like Play-Doh at the moment. So you might want to just up the behavior. And it's obviously a lot of parts is out of perspective, and like I mentioned before, the width is different below the hand versus above the hand. You know, you could put some texture details and so on and so on and so on. Smaller changes, but it does add significant behavior to how we read the scene. That's yours. Aluminium or aluminum, depending on where you are. So this is Atsugi's. Atsugi gets the gold star for doing traditional. That is mighty impressive. Really, really cool. So as we can see, it's a pretty good effort, man. It's really, really nice. Atsugi will go down in history as the first traditional medium to a challenge entry. So, but that being said, it has a lot of stiffness to it. OC means original character, right? Anyways, I'll show you, Atsugi, a cool little trick that a guy at work called Alex Heath, he showed me. Like when you're doing traditional work, and because you know you can't flip the image, what he showed me was you put your cell phone next to your eye, and you look in the reflection of the screen on your drawing, and you can instantly flip it in the mirror, so you get a mirror picture instantly on the surface of your cell phone. If you do traditional, it's a really, really. Or you could use a mirror, but how many times do you have a mirror in your pocket? You always have your phone in your pocket, right? So that was when he told me that, I was like, oh god damn it, that's clever. Like 0 out of 10 times I have a mirror in my pocket. Like why would I have a mirror in my pocket? Doesn't happen. But I constantly have a phone on me, which is a mirror to some degree. You know, which is cool. So when you're doing traditional stuff like this, you can quickly put up their phone. You will look like an idiot, but it'll be good. To take care of my facial hair, I just let it go. It's winter. It's getting to winter, so I'm growing my scarf. I'm not right. So one thing that I see with yours, Atsugi, here is that even though you indicated a light direction, a lot of your rendering, it's correct, but it's seen from a two-dimensional point of view, like it's a two-dimensional existing entity. I'll try to explain it, but most of the things that makes it fail, it's a hard word. Don't hang up on the choice of word, but the problem is if we look at the rendering of all of these things, right? if we zoom in on them in isolation, they make sense. We see that the vine, that's how you pronounce it, the vine is rotating, right? It gets shadows, it gets volume. But the problem is then, like if we take this in isolation, that makes sense. But then the whole thing, like all of them, right? They are all treated with the same like algorithm. They're not actually placed in space, right? So what if, like, is this going backwards in space? So the brightest part of the vine is closer to us, and then it falls off into the distance. Maybe it casts a shadow. The whole thing casts a shadow, and that, because then if that goes further in, the cast shadow needs to be deeper, and then it comes forward again, outwards. That's fine, then we give it more depth. And then just by changing that, we can now see that this doesn't make sense, right? So then we need to start pushing this back. I chose to push it back. I mean, you could have chosen to push it forward, but I chose it to be pushed back into space because I want this to come forward, right? So all these little subtle decisions is tricky to do, and you don't want to do them, but they're vital to how one reads the image. So what's important when you do these kind of things and listening to the light source is that, like I mentioned it on many other Paintovers, is that you have to stay consistent in the light source. So choosing the light source. Sorry, I have something in my nose. I've been scratching it all stream. So it's choosing your light source is so important, and that's why sketches and things like that, before you're doing something that is so permanent like traditional media, is important, because in Photoshop I can do these changes and they're free of charge, in that sense that I can do this and the changes are gone, right? You can't do that on paper. If he was supposed to make it look like relief, he can't have indication of depth. They can't then overlap. It needs to show then in a very, very clear way that it's a relief. So, dear Lord, if he says it's a relief, he has cast shadows that indicate that they're not. So in that case, he failed, because he's indicating curvature, he's indicating depth, but light isn't going through. So that's why I assumed that he's drawing a 3D space rather than a relief. So that's just, I'm making that decision based on the information that he has provided in his drawing. Relief is, like a etched flat surface, like woodwork. If you would make this painting in wood, you wouldn't have a sculpture. You would have cut it all out, but the surface would still be flat if you look on the side, like a window almost. Yeah, that's a relief. Very two-dimensional. but slightly three-dimensional. Anyway, so back to his wonderful drawing. So I think is really interesting. What I think could be improved is you also add a cast shadow of her in a more three-dimensional space, right? So because your cast shadow on her is so tight around the silhouette, which means that she has almost zero volume out, right? So if we have a wall like her throne, right, and we place an object in front of that wall, like on her arm, the cast shadow is identical to the silhouette of the shape. That means that the light is equally spanning the volume of the form, you know, if the cast shadow is even, at an even distance or a perpendicular angle to the shape, right? If we then have the light above, like you indicated, there's also a fall off, right? That means that the shadow is darker on top and it fans out a bit. And that is still if the form is the same volume at the same distance from the back panel. But then we throw in, you know, the fact that she has an arm that goes towards us, which means the shadow itself, the form itself is moving away from the light source, right? And the fact that the torso is quite thick, right? It's like a barrel. So she can't be that distance into the backrest, right? She has to sit further out, unless the light source is more here and shining more, casting the central light on the volume like this, right? That way, that cast shadow can be that short because it's more front lit, and the shadow isn't that deep because it doesn't get cast that far. But the fact that you made that decision based on this arrow, the cast shadow needs to be following the light source, but that also indicate all the other shadows, right? Because you're making that decision based on this. One thing that is lacking in your drawing is cast shadow and the kind of grouping of the light. It's all very wonderfully drawn. It's very tricky to master that in pencil. I think you've done a great job, but you need to have shadow groups which are clearer and more consistent. I must say though, it's an amazing drawing, and I'm very impressed that you did it for the 2-week challenge. It's really, really, really cool of you, and hats off. There's some anatomical issues. I think some of the shadows you're over explaining. Like you can get away with a lot more subtlety in softer shapes, usually on women, you know, because they're softer. They're less angular. Men are way more angular. So when you're defining muscles, it's better to define major shapes rather than each subshape. Because if you start defining each subshape, you're defining that there's actually a significant change in the form that needs to be highlighted. And usually that means musculature that men usually have, or very people with a lot of muscle mass. So if we switch off that layer and look at her legs, because you went in and started defining smaller shadows in there, you're making a statement that that is a significant change that is warranted in the drawing. And you should question, is the fold or is the volume change on her musculature and a fat on the thigh as important as the folds of her skirt? You would most likely say, no, it's not that as important, right? So you could soften some of that, which then gives the folds in the skirt more attention. So it's a matter of like balancing. But you got to do that before you're starting to render, before you start making the decision, okay, where is the rhythm needing to go? Where is the drawing? Where do I need to render shape, right? What's the purpose? It's just a small thing that will make a big difference next time. That would explain a lot. It's like over muscle definition. But I must say, it's a fantastic drawing, very impressive, and the changes are not that massive in order to make it work better. So it's just a matter of be more, like I always mention, be always consistent in your light source. They will always feel awkward making something fall off into shadow, but it's so important that if that is the lighting condition, you have to follow it. That, you know, if you remembered, if you saw on when I was showing my sketchbooks, and I made up anatomy, a pose, and a situation, and I made up a fake lighting situation that didn't exist, obviously not in reference. So I had my sketch for the body, and then I set a lighting condition, right? This is the intensity of the light. Here will be a fall off, here will be a cast shadow, etc. So, you know, maybe it's getting a cast shadow from the rooftop or whatever. And then I said, okay, this is the lighting condition that I have to follow on top of that drawing that I made up. And then you start rendering. And like, okay, if the light is coming from here, what part of that body or limb needs to be in shadow or being lit? So that's the important part, is that you really gotta be stern with your lighting condition as soon as you're starting indicating a direction. Then, on the other hand, though, if you're going a graphic design way, you still gotta stay consistent, because if you change the direction of the light, you're gonna break the illusion, right? So it's all about maintaining the illusion of the image. And the more advanced rendering, the more advanced you gotta be with coherency. But I must say it's an awesome drawing. It has potential. You can adjust a lot of things by going darker, which is great, because the lit side is quite coherent, except on the leg, etc. But there's minor changes that could do a lot. But all in all, very cool contribution. Hats off for going traditional. That's my unfinished. Ixi. It must say A4. It was very good render. It shows that you spent time on it. which is amazing. All right, Ixie. It's very interesting. I like it. But again, we come back to we're coming back to inconsistencies and the point where imagination versus reference. I can clearly see you used reference for the face, but I don't think it's lit correctly because of the nose. I think like this, her face would be lit correctly, right? I mean, obviously, I think you know, but the basic principle: if the light source is there, an object stands there. The cast shadow is based on where it breaches the silhouette, right? So from there to there, here's going to be the cast shadow from that object based on that light source. So if in a 3D space you have a circular light and it's shooting the ray into the image, and you have a surface coming towards us, the cast shadow still intersects with the object. So that cast shadow on her cheek, this shadow, is hard to see based on that light. She would probably have less and more shadow from the eye socket. Again, the cast shadow on her forehead versus light source from the tails means that from the light source to the tails, they are the equal distance because they're casting even shadow on her forehead, which means the forehead and the tail from the side are equally versus the light source that shines, right? So there's a light source that shines, casting a very even shadow from the tail onto her forehead when they're perpendicular, which flattens the illusion. By the way, Atsuki, you can make what are they called? Stumpf? Paper pen easily by taking toilet paper and wrapping toilet paper around the pencil, and you fold it in, and you just use the toilet paper to smudge the graphite. Hey, Lurib. But that enough with I mean, okay, let's keep going. So I think the cast shadow is very interesting on a lot of forms here, especially on the neck. I think that's great. She feels a little bit flat. I would probably not need to add the contrast, but I would try to add a hue shift. a hue shift that indicates change of direction. I think that there's a lot of interesting behaviors in materials. One thing that you should think about when it comes to materials is the innate behavior of matte versus glossy objects. And one way is like the what's it called, reflection rate. I don't remember, but a matte object reflects light in all directions, right? Because it's matte, it doesn't have a shiny surface. The shinier the material, the more mirror-like it will act. So let's take a mirror, which is quite a reflective behavior. And because it's flat, it reflects a flat representation of what we're observing in it. But in a curved surface, it will bend upwards because the picture itself becomes stretched that way. So if you want something shorter in a mirror, you bend the curvature towards the object, so you will refract inwards. So the same goes for material behavior. So if a matte material is reflecting all light in all directions, which means it reflects it very matted, right? And if it's a shiny material, it will reflect more as a lens mirror towards you. So if there is her dress, for example, is a mirror. So if you would simplify her green dress as a disc, and it would be like a mirror, we would see the crown, or the circular thing of the light pointing up, right? We would see the cat, probably have some blue from the mirror there, some red in the corner, some green tablecloth underneath the cat. That would be the reflection. But because if it's a matte dress material, it wouldn't. Then you have to question, what's the purpose of it being matted? What's the person? What? Why did I say person? What's the reason? Oh, god damn it, brain. What's the reason for the dress to be matted? The chair to be matted, the tablecloth, all the objects being the same behavior, right? You got to question that. So is it more interesting maybe that if the highlight is harder, meaning the reflection aspect of her dress is that, is highly reflective. It's a glossy. Is that a glossy surface? Which means she will reflect a lot more of the light. Like satin. Does she have a satin dress on? And then if she has a satin dress, means that all the reflections will be brighter, all the folds will be brighter, but as satin is very thin, it will also create a lot more thin folds, which are low contrast because satin bounces light around. And cotton is a thick material, which gives thick folds. Satin gives thin folds because it's a thin material, less glossy. If I'm drunk, no. I just lost the words. I mean, I'm having wine, but I'm not drunk. And again, the same aspect with the beads, with the rats. Um, stay more consistent with the light source. Cast shadows are important. Um, Setting up your painting to have rhythm is you wouldn't think it's that important, but if you look at all the really good artists, they all have consistency in the light source. They all, when you look at one of the paintings of someone who's really skilled, you'll see the subtle defining changes in a painting that places everything correctly in the space of the painting. They make these small little decisions that just makes it all come alive. And that takes practice, understanding, and it just doesn't come for free. It's what I call the last 5% that you'll never be able to obtain. Those elusive last 5% always keeps moving, because the more you learn, the more the 5% will move away from you, right? But that was the more you try to make a perfect painting by thinking about all these checklist objects or checklist things in your process, the harder it's going to be to get there. But the better and the better the painting is going to feel like, because you have more and more knowledge. And I think these tulips are too simplified, they're flat, and they're ruining the illusion of the painting. One thing with adding shadow that a lot of people do the mistake with, for example, is that they always go towards black. In your instance, you have actually not done that, which is great. But it's important to remember that shadow doesn't mean black. Shadow is not additive. Shadow is the removal of light. So if there is a shadow, it means, obviously cast shadow is a different matter, but in general, something in shadow is not additive. You don't add shadow, you remove light. That's where a lot of mistakes occur. When people think that light is something you add, shadow is something you add. When light is something you add. Yeah, I think Ixi did a great job for sure. Again, so to go back to the topic of choosing the shadow, choosing the light, and so on. What do you want to describe? And I think sometimes you just need to hide things in soft edges and in shadow, in order to dictate the painting, dictate the rhythm of something. Like, what's the narrative? So then, for example, like looking at what these traditional painters, like what's his name? Famous American painter everyone loves to copy, this woman in a dress on a chair. What's his name? Rockwell? No, not Rockwell. Anyways, he painted alla prima, right? So he painted the color. If he messed up, he threw the painting away and started from scratch. But my point being, he painted just a woman. Let's say he just painted one woman sitting on a chair, and what makes it interesting and amazing is his choice of edges, choice of colors, and the subject, right? The subject is Sergeant. There we go. Oh, thank you, Sergeant. Let me try to find it. Right, any, doesn't matter. So we'll look at this one. Sorry for comparing your painting with Sergeant. But what makes this interesting is obviously color choice, texture choice, but also it's the behavior of the material, right? We see that her dress is not, or her coat is not the same as his shirt, which is not the same as the stone pillar, which is not the same as the grass or the water, right? So a lot of the problems when we're learning is that we're all treating everything the same way, right? And that's where real life observation comes into play versus imagination versus purpose. What's the story you want to tell? So she's an important lady, right? She has a rat king on her dress headgear, right? So the cat brings, after the battle, which is the topic of the 2-week challenge, brings more rats to her crown, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm the rat king, which is cool. It's a cool story. But then you have to think, much like, if you would be a musician and you would make a song, right? You want to go, okay, how you play the guitar, right? You play the tunes. If you just play the tunes by the sheet, doesn't sound interesting, right? And it's all about having that emotion. Like, what's the purpose? Why are you playing that song? It's the same like painting. Like, why is the reason? What's the message? What's the purpose of the painting? Is she happy? Is she angry? Do you want to show pride? Is she rich? Is she poor? And those kind of things help indicate the painting. You should try to think of it more levels than just the technical exercise of painting it. So that's why I'm suggesting materials, consistency, god damn it, consistency. There we go. Have some more wine, Bjorn. Consistency in light, which ruins the illusion. That's the thing. It's okay, we can all make mistakes, but when the illusion is ruined, we don't believe it anymore. So the message is lost. Then it doesn't matter of color choices. But if the color choices are also incorrect, the illusion of correct light will be lost because of the fact that there's one factor which doesn't shine as bright as the other. So that being said, looking back at your original, all materials behave the same way except a certain few. So by just pushing some of them, pushing the light more coherently. You'll be doing a lot of more difference, both in edge control, both in material behavior, lost and sharp edges. Your version is a little bit too controlled. You have to let go a little bit more and let things sit in shadow. Let things be in focus, and start controlling the painting towards that, right? Like, does the black in the frame need to be evenly black across the painting? You know, is there light bloom? Why is the light blooming the black of the frame? Well, because it's shining down from a roof light or light outside, the moon maybe. Oh, if it's moon, that means the lighting conditions on the outside is going to be limited, and they're going to be a lot dimmer. You know, all these things impact the painting just by arbitrary decisions you're making, but you have to stay coherent, right? If not, your painting will break. But I must say, good job. Really cool to see. Good job, Ixi. Very good job. I'm very impressed. And like I always say about the evolution of you guys participating in the 2-week challenges, it's always amazing. Always amazing to see 2-week challenge to 2-week challenge. You just step it up. It's amazing. So much fun to see. And give Paintovers on. Alright, Chillstrand. After the battle, obviously the guy has slain the dragon. I think it's really cool. Hey Thomas. Hello, brother from another German mother. Ipsy, that's no problem. You'll get it. It's saved. So. Just let me know and I'll send it to you. Anyways, so looking at the painting, and we look at like if we zoom out, the focal point is in the middle, and it's in the, what's this, a fourth, 1/4 of the painting, and the rest is dark. Right, okay. I can get that, you know, it's a part of the setup. But then you also have to think, why is it only a fourth of the painting? You know, if you want to, I mean, we could easily, you know, say the crop is that, right? This is the crop. But then we are closer into the painting, right? We're almost behind his shoulder, much like the sergeant painting here. We are standing looking at them painting, right? Versus this painting, we are in her face. We are face to face. And here we are more in like a relaxed conversational distance. And here on this one we're not at the table, her table, right? We're sitting at the next table, conversing with her. So going back to your original composition, we're far away, right? We're distant, which means the knight that killed the dragon, we are not a part of that knight, right? So then you should think about have a good one, Luru. So then we should think about, okay, we have to make this shot work. This zoomed out version, we need to start arranging in a way that it'll help us tell the story. So let's start dissecting what the story is. All right, so we can see water. We can see it crashed through the wall. We can see the knight drinking a potion of life, I guess, to recover, which is cool. But so we got blue, white light shining down, reflecting on murky waters. What I probably would do is probably have some, like, what's it called, caustic reflections of the water, because the light hitting the surface of the water, and we, like I explained to Ixi, that the materials behave differently, and reflective surfaces reflect more things, blah 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 blah. We should all understand now that if bright light like this is shining down on a reflective surface, there should be reflections, and one of them is caustics, right? And caustics is also refraction of the light through the water surface, right? And it's depending on the, that's why you see bands of light on the bottom of the ocean rather than one mass, because of the waves, etc. So much knowledge. How to make sense of it. That's the crazy part. So one thing of reflection, yeah, blah blah blah. One thing with reflection, right, a mirror, is that if the mirror is there, you stand there and look at the reflection, you bounce right back, right? So if you put the mirror on the floor, we stand there, and if it's in the correct perspective, the point from where we're standing, eye level, looking forward, will be the point of the reflection. So that being said, we're standing, eye level is there more or less, I would say, roughly. That means the point of the reflection, if eye level is there, head is there, the point of contact is at the bottom. It should be there somewhere, right? And another thing to remember is that water that being lit is the only part of the water that reflects. Water in shadow doesn't reflect, because it doesn't have light being directly lit. That's why, for example, if you look at a pond and there's a shadow of the tree being cast on the pond, you'll see through the water in the shadow. While you look at the water next to the shadow of the tree, you'll see the reflection of the sky. So that's another thing of maintaining the illusion of the scene, right? So if something is being lit, the water surface will reflect from your point of view what you're seeing. But if it doesn't get light, doesn't have light on it, it doesn't reflect light. So you'll get away with it, you know? Which also means a mirror picture casts in depth. So for example, if I draw an object with the perspective leading out from the surface, you can't reflect the same object with the same direction because it's mirroring, right? So it needs to lead away in perspective in the reflection. For example, if we draw a shoe, we see the top of the shoe with the laces and the things like that. And then he stands on water surface. We can't reflect the laces because we see the picture reflected, and it's not a copy, it's a reflection from our point of view. So what we got to do is we got to hide the top of the shoe, because if we are standing above the horizon line, right, it's a reflection based from the point of view. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing a reflection on what should be hidden versus what should be seen. Like in this instance, in the reflection, we shouldn't see this mass. We should see it only as an edge, because we're standing above the eye level, looking down on the head. So in the reflection, it's further down in perspective, which if we start to see the top of the dragon's head in the reflection underneath, it means it's tilted way more down, and it shouldn't receive that light. There you go. So if you do like I did, copying the body, you need to keep in mind that, okay, at what point should I turn the form in order to maintain the illusion. So next level shit right there. Some Inception stuff. But it's important. When you see it and it works, it makes sense. When it's not there, your brain goes, wait a minute. Yet you accept the situation. But you can't pinpoint what's wrong.
All right.
And the more you know, the more you see, and the more you realize it's wrong. Thank you very much for the follow, Jojo323. You and me, Rocky Run all day. Right, so we've established all these things. I would probably add a lot more mood. If something is broken, especially masonry, right? Bricks, mortar, those kind of things usually would kick up lots of dirt. Things, you know, like floating in the air. Maybe blocks of wall, making interesting relationships in the water surface. You know, creating a good composition while maintaining the lighting conditions and lost and found edges. Thinking about caustics, bouncing light, textures, all these things. All in all, it's a cool painting. It's a cool idea of a crashed dragon. One thing with light, which I noticed you did on your wasn't Warhammer, but it was Space Marines. You use too much contrast in shapes in light. You can't be high contrast on armor, bending, or overlapping in being lit, because if you're going to go high contrast, uh, uh, if you're going to have high contrast shadows on something that's lit, that means like the light is absolutely void of hitting that edge, so it goes super dark with no bounce light, which means it's a pure shadow, void, like it's a curvature almost, but we can see it for some reason. So you should never go black and white in a surface being lit, because the amount of shadow required to generate that amount of contrast is doesn't exist, because there's bounce light, there's reflective behavior of the material, bounce light, all these things. You know, you can't just go black, high contrast. It will always ruin the painting. Yeah, I think those are the biggest things that keeps this painting from being the potential what it can be. Obviously, like I always mention, my paintovers are just an indicator to you where you could keep on pushing. It's not to be the one true solution to everything, but it should. My idea is that the paintovers should open your eyes towards possible solutions, so that you can apply them your way.
Oh,
Because
great Odin's raven!
I wouldn't paint the way you've done, so I have to try to. Oh, Chilstrand, praise the sun, praise the sun. Thank you very much for the donation, man. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. So that being said, you know, keep thinking about reflection. Keep thinking about lighting conditions. Like I told Ixie as well, you know, what is the material? What's the purpose of it? To what extent can you push the scene to use it? Right? It's about storytelling. It's about having a purpose for it. So that's mine. Plus all the additional madness rant in between. Cool, children. That's awesome. Please do. Okay. The last one, which is alms. Oh my lord. Arms went all out. Okay. Okay. Um, First of all, Holmes, my hat's off for such an epic endeavor. I think it's really cool. It's a very nice painting, but we have to come back to, for example, what I told Chilstrand at the very beginning. You know, when I cropped and zoomed in. Like, what's the story? Is the gunpowder barrels important? You know, why are we not a part of them? Why are we far away? You know, like if the painting would be like this, you know, we would be sitting a chair away from them, right? We would be sitting there like, oh yeah, great, you and me. We're all like, we're all in it together. Here, we're at the corner of the room. We're standing there like, oh yeah, right. You guys have a party over there. I'll look at the gunpowder and the wine, but I'm not gonna drink it. I'm gonna stay far away. And it's further enhanced by having a line like that, which says you're okay over there, we are over here, and you can't interact with us. This is your cage, right? So for me, I'm not engaged with them looking at this painting. There's certain things that can help you be engaged with them so that you are allowed in. One thing that works against you is the backlighting, right? So all the lighting comes from the back, and we are not a part of that backlighting, right? We're standing outside of it. So what I would do, if we have to use this composition that you created, I would help by directing the light in a way that neutralizes this cage I showed you, so that we are not being limited in the painting by standing outside of the frame, right? So we're trying to merge this arbitrary what's it called? Border. There we go. Border. That was tricky. So by trying to remove the but I see that Sofa Strangler is having issues with the stream. Is everyone else having issues with the stream? Now and then I see the webcam pop. I don't know if it's some like disconnection, or how many of you are having issues with the consistency of the internet or my stream. Hopefully not that many. Anyways, so by softening the all right. Well, unfortunately for Sofa Strangler, then, right, as I said, softening that edge to keep us away. Yeah, Twitch being Twitch. and we darken some of the aspects. Okay, there's a two-step process here, right? So we push things coherent in the light source, and I apologize to Ohms. My changes are going to be very heavy-handed. It's not going to be amazing looking. I want to prove the point. So we have neutralized the edge. We have pushed everyone more cohesively with the backlight. And then naturally there's always bounce light, right?
All right.
Thank you very much for the follow, coffee. So then you have to question, okay, what's the bounce light? So this hot light coming in from the windows, which means we can't have bounce light from the sky because we're indoors. What we could do though is bounce the light that's being sent into the room back into the forms that are facing towards us. So one thing about the highlights is that it's the much like a mirror, it's the point pointing towards us with the light source, right? So if we have this warm light coming in, they're getting the main light, which is quite bright. We could easily like start adding the bounce light into their face. Like I said, my apologies, Ohms, but the changes are going to be very heavy-handed. So we can start adding some of the warm light being bounced off the wall behind us into the to the masses. So that because you have a heavy side light or backlight, we need some contrast. Again, the changes are horribly heavy-handed. But if we take those kind of decisions into consideration, we can start crafting a lighting condition which makes a lot more sense as a picture. Because from our point of view, there's always what's it called? The peak of the form is always towards us. There's always a point towards us, and there's always a point receiving light in that way. And I would also well, use color dodge more to make your gradients a little bit more complicated, more advanced, because there's a lot of it that's pure, just pure brushwork. And I think you should try to use color dodge to some degree, carefully, mind you, to add behavior. a lot of your stuff just feels straight up painted, and when it's just straight up painted, um, it has a tendency to be neutral. And also the level of value, darkness, is something in this painting that comes across as incorrect. But I must say, it's an amazing drawing, really well made. I loved seeing your process of mapping it out in perspective and drawing out everything the way you've done it. It's a great achievement. I must say it's quite impressive. And I think this time around you really control the palette. There's some elements here and there where your choice of palette is quite Ohms like, but you did really well. I must say, really cool. And one thing in this painting I think that could benefit you is the amount of hard versus soft versus lost edges. There's a lot of definition. I think what could suit your painting a lot more is much like Sargent. Let's see, Sargent having hard edges versus firm edges versus lost edges, and it's this harmony of where to look, right? So that's something I would suggest you try in your next paintings, is where can you merge shapes versus where do you need to highlight shapes, edges, I mean. Like, is that edge super important, or can it be a lot softer? I must say though, your expressions are great, your poses are great. It's a really beautiful scene. So this is your original, quite high contrast, and light is there but not coherent. And again, here's my heavy-handed paint over. But ideally you'll see the changes to invite the viewer in a lot more by not segmenting it and hiding some of the contrasts and sucking us into the painting by having a higher point of contrast towards the back, softening some of the edges in the front so that we move in, right? We go towards the table, we go towards the people in the back, and then we circle around and looking around. Must say, good job though, very impressive, and always a pleasure to see Ohms next to painting. So that's it. So tomorrow morning I will post the new 2-week challenge in the category of the 2-week challenge. So it will be 2-week challenge 19 here with a new topic. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining in, and please remind me, for whoever wants it, the Paintover, the PSD. You just let me know on Discord, and I'll retransfer you the PSD, and you can download it on your own at your own time. Aluminium, yeah, yours were the first to be painted over, or the second. So go back and listen to the rant. So thanks everyone for joining in on the 2-week challenge, and everyone here tonight. It was really good fun. Thanks a lot, Chilstrand, for the donation. It'll go to good use towards the community. Thanks everyone for joining in and painting. It was great. I will try to come up with a really good next topic. I'm thinking maybe not to have the mouse, the royal mouse postman career, or should I? I think that would be a cool of a theme. We'll see. I will post it tomorrow. I'm quite tired, so I'm just probably gonna zone out and go to bed or something. But tomorrow morning is gonna be the new 2-week challenge posted. And have a good one, everyone. See you tomorrow morning for warm up, per usual. All right. Bye, everyone. Let's go outro time. Here comes outro.